You're listening to Art Workers, the Independent Artists Forum. I'm your host, Carl Bindman. Thanks for tuning in. Our guest this week is West Virginia-born, New York City-based actor and director Joana Tsuhlares. In our conversation, we talk about finding authenticity in the classics and the opportunities and pitfalls that present themselves to actors making that search in America. Our conversation takes us to West Virginia, back to New York, and to the inner life of the actor. Over to you, Carl. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Carl Bindman, and as I just said, I'm joined by Joana Tsuhlares. Joana, thank you so much for being here. I will say that I also forgot to say the name of the podcast one more time, which is Art Workers, the Independent Artists Forum. We did it. Do you want to say it too, just while we're at it?
Oh, no. The Art Workers, the Independent Artists Forum?
Excellent. So okay. Joana was just telling me before we hit record about how in high school she would do this super cool sounding thing where she would be given a topic and then would have to like extemporaneously make a talk out of it, and similarly would be given a book or a piece of text or anything and have to condense a whole show, a little 10-minute one-woman show out of it. Where did you go to school?
Yeah, it is this amazing thing called speech and debate, and it's a national thing. I went to school in West Virginia, Wheeling Park High School. Speech is a big thing. Like we won, I don't know exactly what year they're at now, but I believe they're at winning the state championship 40 years in a row. Maybe a little bit over that.
Did you win the state championship?
Yeah, I think I was 35. No, I was 36, 37, 38.
Oh my God.
Something like that, yeah.
What happens? Also, Joana here is an actor, a director, very cool person.
Hi. Yeah.
Before I interrogate your history further here,
yeah.
How would you want to introduce yourself to the listener who doesn't know you?
Yeah. Let's see. My name is Joana Tsuhlares. I'm an actor-director based in New York City. And I mean, that's the basic, but I really focus on like classical work. I do a lot of classical work, focus a lot on like collaboration, creation of new work. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's very unspecific.
No,
but
it's good. And I think part of the reason that we get along is that I think our tastes in what draws us to the work is maybe similarly inclined. Because I mean, I also really connect with classical text and trying to make it taste good in the modern mouth. And also,
that is the perfect way to put that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wrote it down 3 weeks ago, and I was waiting for the perfect moment.
Really?
No.
Oh, I would have respected it if it was.
It was extemporaneous, if you say.
Yeah.
And also, I love new work, so I would like to talk with you a little bit about that, maybe later, that connection. But to start, I am curious though to return to the original track of like this speech and debate and championship ability to synthesize ideas in high school. How did you move from that to making theater?
I don't see them as separate. I see it as a continuation. The stuff, I had an amazing educator, Mr. Bill Cornforth, and I see the environment that I shout him out just because he's amazing and his name needs to be known. But the way that he taught theater is something that the fundamentals of speech and debate are something that I carried with me in college and I carry with me now professionally still. It was never like, oh, I do speech and debate and now I do theater. It's like there was no transformation there. It was, just to give an example, you have okay, you have nothing. You don't have a piece to do for a competition. And so they're like, cool, do you want to be on the team? Figure it out. Find something. So you work all summer, you find pieces that you really like, and you're like, cool, I'm gonna make a piece out of this. And you write it, or you like cut it down. You create a piece that maybe is like 5 minutes too long or 5 minutes too short, whatever it is. And then you present that for your peers, and you give notes to your peer. You direct your peers and help them figure it out. And you, through the notes of your peers and the notes of your coaches, you develop your own piece that then you perform for a whole year.
Do you think that pedagogically this was framed as maybe behind the scenes performance training, or like, because I mean, it does seem the way you're describing it is so connected with your artistic practice.
Yeah, because that's basically how I practice now. That's what I was trying to get at, is like being like, okay, I don't have anything, or I have this idea, like I'm working on a production of Hamlet that I've been working on for a few years. And that just came from like me and a friend of mine, Richard, who you know, Richard Colley, who's an actor, playwright, director here in the city.
He wrote Ariadne?
Yes.
Okay.
It was like me and him sitting in a living room being like, wow, we just saw these productions of Hamlet. We could do something really cool with it. Oh, let's do that. And it's basically the same thing that I was doing in high school, just like different circumstances.
Yeah. And I respect and admire that impulse of, hey, we could do this. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really valuable skill to have as an artist, and like sounds to me, because I was going to ask you about something that I talked with Brennan about and I talked with Eben about on their episodes, which is the sort of actor to director pipeline. And I was going to be like, well, so you've expressed to me that you want to do more directing and you're kind of on what seems like the incipient pipeline stage. But actually hearing you say that, it sounds to me like they're not actually terribly separate.
Not at all. I think I can't imagine myself doing one and not the other. I don't want to ever do them at the same time on the same project. That's just my personal taste. But I don't see them as separate endeavors. There's not a director Joanna and an actor Joanna. I'm always Joanna in the room. And it just so happens that certain projects I'm drawn to direct it. I would be a worse actor if I weren't a director, and I'd be a worse director if I weren't an actor. And every time I act, I learn something as a director, and every time I direct, I learn something as an actor that I take into the next project.
Why wouldn't you want to do both on one project then?
Because I think that being a director is being like a sounding board, is being the representative for the audience in a lot of ways, and also a guide for the actors. And if you can't be an eye to watch, then how do you direct? There are people who do it, and I've occasionally seen it happen successfully, and I don't know how. So personally, it doesn't seem, it seems antithetical to do it at the same time, unless it's like an acting scene. I'm in a scene study class or something like that. But for a production, I don't. It just seems antithetical. I don't know. Yeah,
scene study is such an interesting, weird little thing that actors do. I have this pet theory about scene study, which is that it's really misunderstood and misapproached by actors a lot of the time, in that like scene study at school and conservatory and university or wherever you do it is like, oh, this is my chance to actually do some acting. And it approaches it like a play, like I'm doing a full thing here. And it's kind of, I think, the name, to me at least, and the way I think about scene study, is suggests like study the way that a visual artist would, you know, like I'm going to draw an apple 100 times so that when I have to draw an apple in my actual painting, then I'll know what I want my apples to look like, you know? And I think scene study, because actors often don't get the chance to do all the acting that they want to do, they take the study, the mere repetition, the mere mechanical practice as expression, you know? And then the study becomes worthless as study because it gets to be performance. And I definitely had somewhere I was going with this thought.
You're all good. You're all good.
But so tell me about your Hamlet idea, unless you don't want to sort of give up the goods.
I can talk about it. Yeah, so I'm from Appalachia. I was born and raised in West Virginia. My family's from West Virginia. And my collaborator, Richard Colley, who I mentioned earlier, is he's from Virginia. We both went to school in Virginia. And I don't know, we were just like, wow, we really love the accents that come out of that region. And we know there's like there's a historical connection between Appalachia and Elizabethan England. A lot of the people who migrated to Appalachia were from the Elizabethan Isles from that time period. A lot of the like traditional ballads that still exist in those areas, in like deep mountainous regions of it. Appalachia is a complicated place, and there's a large variance over the area. So take all of what I'm going to say with a grain of salt.
Or a grain of cultural specificity from your experience.
Yeah. Where I'm from is not necessarily where some of these traditions are taking place. So I don't want to like, I'm from Appalachia. I'm very passionate about the region, but I also just want to acknowledge like my experience is different than what I'm about to talk about.
Yeah. Or from, say, J.D. Vance's.
J.D. Vance is not from Appalachia. Fun fact.
Fact noted.
He was raised outside of the ARC. If you're from the region, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so what was I saying?
You and Richard.
Me and Richard were chatting. We were like, the historical significance. So there are like a bunch of ballads that are still performed or like passed down through generations in Appalachia that are actually from like Elizabethan era, like Scotland. And a lot of the accent markers that are in these regions date back to that time period in place.
Wait, you mean to tell me that Shakespearean actors didn't speak in RP?
They did not.
What the fuck?
No. And so we were like, wow, this is really interesting. And we feel like it's only been done in like a funny way. Like I remember we did a production, me and Richard went to college together. We did a lot of productions together. And in one of them, we did a production of As You Like It, where like the people who lived in the forest were all had Southern accents and that was cool and fun. It wasn't poking fun at those people, but it was like just a fun marker that those characters had. Yeah.
And glad that a production of As You Like It actually goes through the effort to differentiate the country from the court. Good job.
Deeply agree. Well, pin in that. Yeah. But we were like, I feel like it needs to be grounded in some sort of reality to give this experience and this interaction with language its due. And I was like, oh, this is frustrating because I feel like a lot of the Shakespearean theater that makes it more quote unquote realistic throws out the language, just kind of laissez-faire experience of it. And
the recent Denzel Washington Macbeth comes to mind.
I haven't seen it, but I'm sure I trust your opinion there. But no, but there's just, I feel like there's been a lot of, shows that I've seen that people will improv off of the text and people will just...
You can't see it, folks, but I'm making a face. I'm making a pained face.
It hurts my little Shakespearean heart. And then on the other side of it, you have people that are like, oh, I have to be Laurence Olivier, which also is frustrating to me in a whole other way. And I was like, there has to be a happy medium here. You have a cultural precedent for a genuine experience of heightened language in Appalachia that I think is not necessarily as vibrant in other places. And
especially, I think, in white culture as well.
Yeah. No, that is a good point, because I think there have been a lot of really interesting explorations of what I'm talking about when it comes to like viewing Shakespeare through the Black experience, for instance. Or I saw an amazing production that, is it NAATCO did of, is that the name of the company, that Asian American Theater Company? The National Asian American Theater Company, I think is what it stands for. But they did a really amazing production of Romeo and Juliet that wasn't necessarily through, like, I'm talking about dialects. It wasn't necessarily exploring a dialect, but that was like a very down to earth, like from their voices exploration. Like that would be an example from a non-white perspective.
Well, that phrase of down to earth, I think is really, really important, maybe, because it seems to me like what you're describing is a search for a movement away from the way that Shakespeare is often framed in America, I think, as like getting its cultural value from being this genteel thing brought over from Europe, as like this connection to the Western heritage of art making, and living in this weird in-between place of like, we're doing American Shakespeare, but it's a gesture towards British theater tradition because it doesn't want to find like what it means to speak American in these words that are not American,
Yeah, I think there's a place to speak American in those words.
And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking for. And I think...
And that's what I mean is they are staying in this kind of weird in-between place of doing it politely, of like, well, we're going to be like the British people and say the words nice and clean and be so clear, at the expense of looking for where these traditions actually connect with American cultural history.
And with love, if you're trying to be something else, you're missing the point. I think the best actors, period, but the best classical actors in particular, it's about finding your own voice and not being afraid to speak the text through that voice.
Yeah, and if it doesn't sound the way you think it's supposed to, good.
Yes. Good. It's just, oh God. Like when you hear an actor, I once I assistant directed a production of Richard II once, and I was talking to one of the actors afterwards, and we both lived in Queens and we would take the train, and he was talking about like, you have actors who can like say the text clear, who say it and it makes sense. And then you have actors who just have something else. And I think that something else is just being confident in your voice and looking at humanizing the text through yourself in an interesting way. Like, I don't 100% know. It's harder it's easy to say and hard to do.
Yeah. Well, which I think gets us back to your production here of using the language of earnest, earthy Americana.
Yeah, and finding something that is already there and being like, this is one, looking at it from 2 points of view. One, I look at a region that I love, Appalachia, that is seen as like a one-dimensional kind of poverty-ridden, drug-addicted ridden place. That is
on the other hand,
stereotype.
this bastion of like lost nobility, I think very easy to project whatever you want to onto. Yeah,
exactly. And I was like, I really want to show that this place has a distinct and interesting voice that is complicated, that is not one-dimensional, that is not monolithic, that it's not a one kind of person that lives in this place, and then it's not just one experience that comes from this place. And what is more interesting than to say, we have a voice in classical theater. Poor people have a voice in classical theater. People who live in rural areas have a classical theater. People who don't speak in like a regular accent, like what is seen as a proper accent, have a place in theater. And that doesn't necessarily mean also like there's a stereotype that Appalachia is all white. Like that's not what I'm going for either.
Not.
Like I want to explore like this place is not a monolith. And at the same time, looking at classical theater and being so frustrated with the classism and just elitism and dogmatic view of what classical theater is, and being like, fuck that, you're getting it wrong. Sorry, can I?
Of course.
Okay, good.
Shit, fuck, ass, tit.
Okay, good. Like, fuck that. You're missing the point. You're making it so it's not accessible to people and that they feel like they have to put on airs to be in these spaces, and you're lessening the voice of actors, and I'm in New York, so like actors in New York being able to explore this text in a real way and actually say something about it. Yeah. And so I was like, I can marry these two once, and I think hopefully it happens. Say something really interesting about classical theater and about Appalachia and the classism. Both of those things deal with classism in an interesting way.
Well, if you're looking for a Hamlet, I lived in Kentucky for 2 years.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. And then I moved back to Montreal, Canada.
I'm sure there's a Montreal version of what I'm talking about too.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, the linguistic politics and history of Montreal are unbelievably complicated and unbelievably rich. And that's a vein that is mined, I think, really effectively by contemporary theater in Montreal. Like my friends in Montreal who are making stuff, it's like kind of unavoidable as engaging with these questions in a way that it also is in New York, but somehow manages to be avoided in New York. Or go
What
ahead.
do you mean by that? But what you're saying, I don't know if that's a positive thing. Like, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I think that maybe we're in denial about the multilinguistic nature of our society here in New York.
That is what I mean.
I've never been to Montreal, so I don't know, but I feel like it's codified that you're dealing with multiple languages, where like the circles of friends that, like the social circles, like there are circles of people who are, because of their cultural or economic background, are multilingual, and there are circles that are distinctly not. And
the circles that are distinctly not are the circles who make the decisions about what shows get made and whose tastes are validated in shows and who are getting more work.
100. Oh, there are companies pushing against that,
Of course.
But in general, in a broad
pushing
sense,
against this thing that is real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is what I mean. Like I am in agreement. Like I remember I won't say their name just because I don't know if they would want me to talk about this, but in my conservatory, I was studying with somebody who was from the Bronx, and they are Black, Latina from the Bronx, and they expressed frustration with like their inability to sound right. They were like,
"Oh no!"
Yeah. And it made me sad.
I'd say that makes me sad to hear. Yeah.
And I spent some time speaking with them because I was like, your voice belongs in this text. It shouldn't be the other way around, you know? Like
we say but you can say that though. But there are pressures.
I'm not saying there's not pressures.
Okay, yeah.
I think what they were responding to are the pressures.
Yeah.
You know, that me, who sounds the way I sound, don't necessarily have to grapple with those pressures in so specifically hostile a way as it was for this person, you know, where it's just like they try to use their voice. They're told in school, use your voice, speak honestly, sound the way you sound. And also, here's William Shakespeare, a 400-year-old man from the UK writing in this very, very, very on its face, inaccessible language, you know? And I think the feeling of inaccessibility comes from those pressures, not from the text itself, you know?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think a little bit of a caveat to what I'm about to say. I don't think that Shakespeare should be the only theatrical education that somebody gets. I think we should have a wide breadth, of other playwrights that people explore.
Chekhov and nobody else.
No, but I mean, there are a lot of more contemporary American playwrights that would more directly speak to somebody's experience if they're having trouble accessing it through classical text.
But the point I'm making is by just bringing up this person is that eventually they were able to find a way to find comfort with speaking their own voice in the text.
Yeah, amazing. That's what I was going to get to too, where I was like, there are amazing actors who I feel like are the most successful in classical theater who do that, who speak in. I don't know any people who speak in the way you should in classical theater who are top of the top amazing. I feel like everyone that I've seen that I'm like, you are one of the best classical theater, like not all American, not like all different backgrounds, is they fuck with the text.
Yeah.
Not the words, but how it is quote unquote supposed to be done is the way that it's supposed to be done is to fuck with it.
Yeah. And by fuck with it, it just means kind of bring yourself into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to literalize the metaphor of fucking with the text, but like you kind of have to put yourself into it,
yes.
you know?
No, that's good. Yeah.
Which I think also Shakespeare would appreciate. He was a ribald young man. Yeah. But all of this to say that to bring it back to the claim that you pushed back on about what I was saying in Montreal, I think because in Montreal the linguistic politics are constant and unavoidable for every single person living there, and here in New York, a lot of people I think just don't have to worry about it. Specifically, white people, specifically the people who make theater, most of it, and get most money for it. It sort of sets the tone where it's like neutrality is the goal, or aiming towards some theoretical neutrality, and that's just frustrating.
Also, the audience.
Right.
I think, one, the taste of the people who are creating the theater, but also the inaccessibility of theater, which makes it so that only broad general term, only people of a certain economic stability can see it. And that means that a lot of those people are people who are in those bubbles that only speak one language. Yeah.
Or who've flown into New York for a week from wherever, and they just want to see some garbage. But anyway, neither here nor there. I'm seeing the Harlem Classical Theater Midsummer this Friday, and I'm very curious and excited because I haven't seen any of the Harlem Classical Theater work.
I don't think I have either.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to see that, in part because fucking somehow, strangely, a big Canadian comedian, Russell Peters, is playing Bottom.
Interesting.
Unbelievably strange.
How did that happen?
I don't know. Do you know Miguel Bregante?
I don't think I do.
He assistant directed this. So he's out of town right now, but I do want to talk to him about how that happened. Because also Russell Peters is like a big fucking deal in Canada. Maybe in New York people aren't necessarily aware, but he's like kind of the best known stand-up comic working now in Canada. So
that is why I've never heard of him. Sorry.
Of course not. No, that's fine.
But that is wild. That is wild.
Yeah. Weird.
But you're going to go see the show.
Yes.
Yeah.
And specifically because it's the Harlem Classical Theater, I am very curious about how the text will be handled compared to, the public theater, I think very conspicuously is trying to be more inclusive and offer different kinds of voices and different takes on the text. So that's something. But also compared to Sam Gold, right? I'm curious.
Yeah. I have thoughts.
Tell them. Unless you don't want to be too negative on this, our podcast of the ages. I will say, on Sam Gold, his Macbeth with Daniel Craig, I got to see when I was preparing my own Macbeth.
I also saw this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the guy who played Lennox, he was in the wheelchair.
Yes, he was
miraculous.
I was going to say he was with the utmost love. That was the one part of the show where I was like, "Oh, that's really cool."
Yeah,
and he was amazing. Yeah,
he had the best, I thought, the most natural that Shakespeare has felt in an American voice to me that I've ever heard. And I don't valorize Shakespeare as it should sound good in a British voice, but I think because of this dynamic that we're kind of talking about of the desire to have it sound like something else, that this I don't know, embarrassment that permeates a lot of American Shakespeare, that but we're not British, fuck.
And the embarrassment that permeates Shakespeare education in America.
Oh, God.
I think that's the root of it.
And the shame.
Yeah.
And
theater education. Yeah. In particular.
And actors feeling bad because they're not connecting to the text because they're not being taught in a way that they can connect to it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But this guy, I'm just looking up his name right now because, or I'll plug it in after. And the name of that actor is Michael Patrick Thornton. Michael Patrick Thornton. But he sounded, and this is, I haven't seen so much theater in New York at this point, but he was the most wow, that guy's just speaking. That's just his voice. That's just his voice, and he's saying these lines, and they're perfect.
It's wild when it happens. It's wild when it happens, and it's wait, that's 400 years old? What? He didn't just come up with that? When there are moments where when it's happening, quote unquote, correctly, I have to look up the text and be is that in there? Sometimes when I'm watching,
it just slaps you in the face. It's just so new. What?
Yeah. Wait, what? Where I find it is when you find the the breaks in thoughts and where someone finds, oh, this thought is new to me. I'm working through it, but they're doing it in a way that feels genuine and real. I see it a lot with Andrew Scott, and he talks a lot about taking his time with the text, which people have thoughts about. But I think what I really appreciated with him is those moments. I see those moments of like, oh, that is something that I have to go look it up. That can't be right. And then it's right. It's in there. And he just found, oh, that's where it speaks to me. I'm speaking through Andrew Scott. I'm sure he has his own point of view. But
no, he doesn't actually.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
No, he doesn't. He only ever says what you say.
Get.
Yeah, I have to go actually look that up if that's in the text. It is. You said something earlier about improvisation in Shakespeare, and I made a face, and you were like, yes. But the Macbeth starts with that character, with Lennox, sort of doing a casual audience interaction, and then the play beginning, if you remember.
Yes.
Yeah. What does that feel like to you? Or maybe what do you mean about improvisation in Shakespeare?
I think it's fine when it's not debasing the text. When it's not, this text is too complicated for you, so we're going to add some fun stuff.
Right. So when it's not replacing...
That is the problem. When it's something that's trying to distract you from the text, then it's a problem. When it's something that is having a genuine moment with the audience and reacting in the moment, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I debasing the text is a really strong way to put it. I think it isn't something, at least that I see a lot, is like textual improvisation within Shakespeare, unless somebody has forgotten their lines.
I've seen it. And I've rarely seen it work.
Do you have an example in mind?
Do I have an example in mind?
I can offer you an example of when I have done that.
I would love that. Yeah.
So it was doing, what's the play? Titus Andronicus.
I love Titus Andronicus.
Great play. Weird play.
Weird play, troubled play, but interesting.
A little. And we needed to cover a costume change for Lavinia after her moment.
Attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to kind of cover that costume change, we were doing an outdoor theater thing, Barefoot Shakespeare Company. How's it going? I was playing Saturninus, and so I came out and brought Tamara with me and sort of like talked to the audience about like showing off Tamara, being like, look at her. Oh, look, she's pregnant. I did that. My powerful Roman seed, so it was like, because we couldn't go to the next scene for the way that the production was structured, it was like I came out and did a minute of basically improvised Saturninus being a silly weirdo, which is how he was characterized in this cut. And then we left, which served the purpose of like strengthening Saturninus's characterization in this version of the show and showing the progress of Tamara getting pregnant and me thinking it's mine, so that when it turns out it's Aaron's, I'm like, what? Actually, that doesn't happen in the play, but just sort of seeding for the audience. No, but that implication
is there. That if you find out, then she will die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so it did accomplish a couple of narrative goals, but the main goal was just logistical. And I don't know if I would characterize that as like improvisation really on Shakespeare, because I wasn't trying to be like, I'm saying my text instead of Shakespeare's text, but I'm not precious about the moment. So I'm curious what your feeling would be about that.
Yeah, I think it depends. I wasn't able to see that production, so I don't
think we knew each other.
I don't think we did either. Yeah. But I would be hesitant of the description that you just gave me. But I wouldn't. That's a director's choice. That's not the actors who do it are serving the production and the lens that they are pursuing in this production. I don't know if that would be the strongest choice as a director, because one, I'm thinking about the particulars of the play, and I don't know if that's the vibe we're going for, but or how you want me to answer the question. But Lavinia has just been brutalized, and Saturninus should be scary, because he's the driver of a lot of the stakes for a whole B plot of the play, of this baby and what could happen if this baby is found. If you don't know the play, I'm sorry.
Too bad.
Yeah. Read it. No,
I mean, do.
There's
great.
The queen has a baby. She thinks it's the emperor's, but it's this other guy's, Aaron's.
Aaron.
And she tries to send the baby to Aaron for Aaron to kill, and he's like, "Fuck no, I'm going to keep this baby."
Yeah.
So like, and then the Goths find it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
But like it is a driver of a lot of the stakes, and by giving this goofy moment, I don't know. I would have to see the production. But maybe it worked. It very well might have.
This production's Titus is so essentially characterized by like the tension, I think, between like how unbelievably fucked up it is, and also how
finding breaths in that fucked upness.
Yeah, but the pace of it is, it's like Lavinia has just been like brutally assaulted. And then they come in and taunt her with her tongue, Yeah. And it's like there is something almost absurd about how dark it gets that I think lends itself to wanting to release from the darkness by making the absurdity funny. And this production took that route. So it was really... Go ahead.
Titus is a dangerous play.
Oh, yes.
Because if you do it without thought, you can really fuck up. It's one of those plays that you can really fuck. As you like it, you can't fuck it up that much. Titus, you can really fuck it up. And you could be like, please, no one ever see that production again. I'm not that production, but I'm saying if I were to fuck it up, I might be like, let's hide that away. And so it's one that what you make funny has to be a choice.
Yeah.
And it is funny. I mean, Titus comes in at the end with a chef's hat and is like baking people into pies.
Here's your son.
Like, eat it, go ahead. And then he's like, you know what?
Guess what?
Yeah. Like it's
like that's the thing.
Funny.
Well, it can be. Mm-hmm. Like,
but like I keep thinking of Barry.
Yeah.
Barry is the show.
Yeah.
Barry is like a funny show, but it deals with some dark shit.
But it has total mastery of tone.
Yes.
Which maybe Shakespeare in Titus had not figured out yet. I will say.
Possibly, but as a director, you can edit it to make it work.
Yeah, of course.
You can cut. You can make... I don't know. I think
you can add a scene, maybe, with Saturninus parading Tamara, bragging about the strength of his sperm.
And it might have... I'm not saying it didn't work. It very well might have worked. I'm just saying with that play, I would have to watch it. I would have to watch it. It makes me nervous because I know how difficult the play can be. But getting back a little bit, I guess that's not necessarily what I mean when I say improving off of the text, because that's like a choice per production. Like I've seen things where like the Henry V prologues, like they go like, what's the national production where he has his phone, right? And there's something with that. Like I don't know well enough to tell you who, what, when, where that happened. But like
that's rumor, right?
What do you mean?
Then the character of the prologue, that's rumor. Is that the one where he comes in and is like, I'm all sorts of crazy things are happening.
Yeah.
And then he brings the wrong report to the guy who thinks his son was killed in the battle. And then the histories,
I think you're right. It's been a hot second since I've read that one.
The histories do maybe a little bit blend together for me.
They do, especially the whole Henriette. I'll be like, was that in part 1 or part 2? I forget.
Folks, it's Henry IV part 2.
But I've seen where like there's improv there and that works. And I think that would be considered what you're talking about, where there is like a whole new section that has been added that is new. I think that I've seen it work in an interesting way. And I don't think that's necessarily debasing. What I see is
also prologues are a special case, I think.
Special case. But what you're talking about is a separate part of the play. You're adding another scene.
Basically, adding a scene.
You're adding a scene, which you could do physically or you could do verbally, and doing it verbally is a choice that may or may not work. I'm not necessarily against that, but depending on the circumstances. But what I'm against is I have a monologue, but I don't think it's interesting enough. So I'm going to make little quips and to make it interesting. That is what I have a problem with.
God. If you can't make Shakespeare interesting, you can't make your quips interesting, actor.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
Nightmare.
Yeah. So that's more what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, I'm relatable. See, I'm making fun of it.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Hate that.
Uh-huh. Me too.
What draws you to Shakespeare? Why do you want to do his text now, other than the fact that it's very good?
Yeah. I think two things. I was talking to a mentor of mine yesterday, actually, and someone who had been a professor in college who I kind of go to when I need advice. And I was talking to her about finding new monologues and stuff. And I was like, I'm just trying to find stuff that fits in my mouth. And I feel like Shakespeare fits in my mouth in a way that is really interesting and that will speak to things that I don't know that I need to know as a human until I say them out loud. Like when I was in college, I played Hamlet. And I remember when the person asked me to do it, I was like, I mean, fuck yeah. But do I really want to play Hamlet? Like I didn't really have a point of view on who that character was. I wasn't drawn to play that character. Now, if you were like, play Hermione in The Winter's Tale, I'd be like, fuck yeah. But Hamlet, I just didn't feel the draw. I was like, this is famous. I know I should do it. And then through the process of doing the production, it literally changed who I am as a human. And I experienced that when I played Malcolm this fall. I experienced that when I was like, when I played Jacques in As You Like It. Like, I like... Scansion. I know it's not right. I thought you were reacting to the pronunciation.
No. I know his name gets pronounced all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
I was laughing at the idea of the character. I find him very silly.
He is very silly. He's a clown. But like I find that often I discover Shakespeare speaking to things that I didn't even know I needed to find words to express. And I'm like, oh shit. Wait, that's actually exactly what I needed to figure out.
What is that process like for you? Finding your point of view on a piece or a character?
Hard. I think a lot of people think that when people who like Shakespeare do Shakespeare, it's easy. And it's not.
We like it because it's hard.
We like it because it's hard.
It's so hard.
And a lot of the times you're like, what are you saying? But... I like to, we talked about this a little bit. I'll bring it up. I like to get the text in my bones is how I like to say it, where I don't realize I know it as well as I do until someone asks me like I remember I was directing The Tempest and someone came up to me and they were like, where is what is it? Ariel in prison. And I was like, between a cloven pine or something, like whatever it says in the text. And I was like, oh wait, I didn't even know I knew that. And that's the way I want to know it, in that I'm not intellectualizing it. It's just in there and I can just, I know it. And how I go about that is I translate the text. If I'm directing a play, I do it with the whole play. If I'm acting in a play, depending on the size of the character, I study the whole play, but I'll do this for the scenes that I'm in, or if it's like a large part, maybe I'll just do the whole play. But I'll take the text and I find all the words that I don't know. I do the research on like the phrases I don't understand and the historical context for them. Shakespeare Navigator, my man. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's like a guy who's unfortunately passed away now. But he was like a Shakespeare professor guy in I think Washington State, and he has annotated texts. That's a big help. There are a bunch of others, but like that's one where I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck this phrase means. That's a resource that I use, and along with like other ones. And then I'll translate the whole thing in my own words. And I don't remember that. There's no point to that. Oh, and I scansion it. And I throw it out after I do it. But the process of doing that, which is a pain in the ass, allows me to have it in my bones, to know it without knowing it.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the process as an actor, I do that. But then I find that in the rehearsal process, it's like pushing against a rubber band. It's like, it's not working. It's not working. I remember when I did Malcolm this fall, I was like, I have no fucking idea. With the Malcolm Ross scene, I was like, I'm lost. I have absolutely no idea what to do with this scene. I remember just getting like, when you perform a scene and halfway through you're like, shoot me now. Like, I would love to be.
Never happened to me. You hear that out there, directors, casting directors, agents? I have never, ever been lost in a scene. Thank you.
If anyone were true, I'm sure it's true for you. But I was like in the middle of one of the big chunks of text and I'm like, I have no fucking idea what I'm saying. And I'm so lost. And then at some point, something happens. I don't know what. It's different every time. And it'll break. And I'll be like, okay, I can play. My scene partner for that scene in Macbeth, he said, it was like we climbed a mountain and then at the end, we were able to dance on the top.
Well, that's nice.
And I was like, that's it. And for every part, it's a different mountain. But the goal at the end is to dance at the top.
I'm grateful that you shared that process.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. But I do want to maybe differentiate the question of preparing a role versus finding your point of view on it. Like doing a role versus deciding what you want to say about the role.
Yes.
Because that's something I am struggling with right now. So I'm curious for you.
Doing a role versus finding your point of view in the role. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing the work versus what you want the work to be about also, maybe.
I don't think I make a conscious decision. I don't. I think it's finding... I had a teacher or I had a guest artist in college once say, don't get it right, get it true. And I think that's some of the best acting advice I've ever gotten. And I think a part of it is just, how do I react? This person just found out that their children and wife were slaughtered because he left them. How does that make me feel? Okay. Like that, I think that's what I try to...
Did you play Malcolm? Did you play Macduff?
I played Malcolm, but Malcolm's in the scene after he finds out. And I'm like, oh shit, that sucks. Let's go take him on with an army. And better than that. But he's there when Ross gets the news.
Right, because he's like, get your sword.
Not Ross. Macduff.
Macduff.
Sorry.
That's, I think, where I got confused. Okay.
I think I might have said Ross earlier too. The guy who I played it with had previously played Ross. And so it doesn't matter.
It's fine. But I will say, actually, now that I know what the scene you're talking about, that fucking scene is fucking crazy.
It's insane.
Malcolm being like, oh man, maybe I'm the worst king ever. Oops. Would you want me to be king? Even like...
Yeah, it's...
wild.
It's wild. I think that we found a good place with it. That felt good and real, but
it cut you off. I did. I wanted to hear. No,
it's all good. I don't think I make I don't think I go in, especially at the beginning, like, oh, I've done my research. I've translated it. I understand what every word it means, which, yeah, I understand it. And now, like, what is my take on Malcolm? I don't think I do that. And I think even when I'm performing it, I'm not like, this is my Malcolm. I'm like, okay, how do I set myself up to experience the arc that I need to for this scene? Like, I remember just being like, okay, I need to come into this scene in this place, and then I'm gonna jump into the river and hope I get across. And whatever that is what it is tonight. Mm-hmm. And I think that gives, and obviously there's scene work. There's scene work that you develop with your partner that's like, okay, we've talked about like what this means for us, maybe, like, or what the background of this and what this means. Like, that inherently sets up a point of view. But I'm never like, this is what I'm presenting to the audience on who Malcolm is. I'm trying more to be truthful in how I'm approaching it rather than intellectual.
Yeah. How do you, at the end of the night or at the end of the production, do you take stock, though? Do you kind of look back and be like, oh, this is what my Malcolm was about? Or is that just not of interest?
I fight against that because I find when I do that, I'll be like, oh, when I did it in rehearsal 3 weeks ago, it was better.
Oh yeah. Well,
Like, and no, but I mean, like, I had this moment that I think really spoke to what I was truthful to me. And I'd said it better 3 weeks ago and I didn't do it tonight. Fuck. And I think that show in particular taught me tonight, this is what the truth of it was. And that's okay. And it's going to be different than it was 2 weeks ago. And maybe it wasn't as impactful from my point of view, but I don't actually know that because, and this is why you need a director. I don't actually know that because I'm in my body and I can't see.
yeah. Also, it's not really your job to worry about that.
No.
Yeah.
And it's my job to react truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And Meisner, woo. And that's it. And it's very easy to say that.
And very hard to do.
And I don't always, I say this like, oh, I know, I struggle with this. But my goal as an actor is to see what happened and not judge it after.
So key, I think, is the not judging and just allowing. Like,
so hard. It's so hard.
What's hard about it for you?
What's hard about it for me? I think you want to be good. You want to be good and you want to be liked and you want to achieve a level of dramatic potency that you see other people achieve. Like I think theater is like a drug. I think it's like human heroin. Like I think it's like condensing of a human experience that makes us feel things and makes us high in a way. And when I see performers that make me get that high, I'm like, I want to do that. Like deep in my bones. I want to do that. And when I perform, I'm like, I am putting myself up to like, am I working towards getting to that? And that inherently is a judgment on if I'm getting it right and not if I'm getting it true. Because my performance as a human is going to be different than Andrew Scott's because I'm a different person. It's going to be different than Meryl Streep. It's going to be different than Viola Davis. It's going to be different than, whatever huge actor that you see that has moved you and whatever. It's going to be different. I'm not saying that I'm as good as those people, but there's no point in me trying to be them, to become better. What's important is me seeing the vulnerability that they put on stage and being like, I need to explore being that vulnerable with myself. That's easy to say and hard to do. Like I've been saying, like I feel the want to be better. And I do have a competitiveness. I started competing. I started theater by competing. Like there is like a want to be, I can do better. I can compete. I can da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's hard to let that go. It's hard to let ambition go, but you need it sometimes. It can be a tool, but you also need to let it go sometimes. And it's hard to know when, and it's hard to realize when you're doing it. I catch myself judging myself without even realizing that I'm doing it. I have to be like, oh, no, it's okay. Today was a little bit off. Today was off. What does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah.
What does that mean?
But I will also say, what does getting it true mean?
You know it when you feel it. Like it's like you're reacting. I'm not thinking. I'm not in my head. I'm not thinking like, oh, I'm getting stimuli and I'm reacting to it. And I'm hitting the things that I'm saying my lines, I'm hitting my marks, I'm doing the things that I need to do. I'm not being a selfish actor and I'm not being I'm not being selfish. I'm not being self-absorbed, but I'm in the moment. I'm reacting. And when you hit it, you're like, oh, afterwards you get off that ride and you're like, oh, okay. That was it.
And then you put it away so that the next time you're acting, you're not trying to think about getting that
there
feeling.
Because you might not.
Yeah.
You might not. And that's okay.
Which for me, because a lot of what you're saying resonates so strongly with me with how I try to approach the work and the moment to moment of being on stage and not judging and just like, this all feels of a kind with how I think about the work. With maybe significant difference, which is I am not so opposed to entering with a really strong idea of what a thing could be. Like, I think it's educational for me and gives me something to build on to be like, here is what I think this character might be about. What if that's true? And iterating, like, I think for me, maybe because I bring that in, but then I try to hold it also kind of lightly so that it can also be one of these ephemeral whispers that go away when they have to, but it's there for me to start and then I can chuck it.
I have two thoughts. Sorry if you had a question at the end of that, but I think what's interesting about our friendship is that I think we're very different actors, and that's cool. Like, I think approaching it in a way that is impactful for you is all that matters.
Yeah. Well, the point of acting with other people and not yourself is to explore other people's processes and
exactly.
And to find what happens when you bring who you are and how you work to meet how this person is and how they work. What's the point otherwise?
Yeah, there's no point otherwise. Yeah, it's all about collaborating and learning from other people and learning to work through differences and how that person works and how you work. But my second point, I had a second point.
Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting your question.
No, it's all good. My second point was, I come in with ideas, but they're action ideas. They're not character ideas. Like, what if I begged him here? Okay, let's try that.
Yeah.
Like, I'll come in with an idea, but not necessarily a broad, like, character. Like, what if I were like a finance bro? Like, I don't come in with I might have an idea like that with a specific physical moment. Yeah. But like a specific action that might be like, I persuade him, like, I don't know, like I'm seducing him. Like that is a character idea, but it's based in an action. Yeah. I think I try to, again, every part is different. Everything is different. I don't have strict rules that I go by, but in general, I try to keep it actionable rather than idea, because I have trouble not getting in my head, and I would get in my head if I'd had a broader idea.
Because it's like, did that choice that I make actually support what I thought this character was going to be? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I hear that. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. Mm-hmm. We're almost at time.
100%.
So I do have, unfortunately, a bunch of other questions that I did want to ask you. So you'll, I think, have to come back if that's amenable for you. To do a second episode, maybe. You don't understand how excited I would be to do that. My favorite thing is just nerding out over theater. So any day, anytime, any day. Sweet. Because, well, maybe this is something that is worth touching on, if not getting into before we go. But one of the reasons I was really excited to talk to you on this show is you and I met doing a scene at Columbia for a Columbia director. But neither of us went to an Ivy League school. Neither of us are from New York. And I've pitched this show as a place to hear from people who maybe otherwise wouldn't get interviewed or talk through process with other working artists. And it occurred to me that 2 out of the 3 people that I'd interviewed so far were currently at Ivy League institutions, which is...
It's very frustrating, which is not a statement on those people.
No, I mean, like, God, do it if you can.
Yeah,
fuck.
Exactly. If you can, fuck yeah.
I think specifically also a graduate program is different than an undergraduate program.
I would agree with that, yeah. And I've listened to your other interviews and they were amazing. And the director that we worked with,
Shouts out to Brennan.
Brennan is amazing. And so it in no way is a slight on those people, but it can be frustrating to not have that background, but to feel that your voice is still relevant and sometimes not be taken seriously because you don't come from a certain pedigree, which I think does exist, especially in classical spaces. In classical spaces and in just access. Because what the MFA gets you is access, right? Connections. And it's not all connections. There's obviously an educational aspect to it, but part of it is connections. Yeah. And the business is also, like, let's be real, 70% connections, 20% talent, 10% generational wealth. Before we go, where can people find you? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say? Or anything you would have wanted to be asked? Oh, okay. Anything I wanted to be asked. I'll start that first because I feel like plug should maybe be last. anything I wanted to be asked? Well, we're maybe having another conversation, so I don't know. But I'd love to talk about our differences theatrically, which we don't have to get into, and a little bit more, because I think that's really interesting. And I know we were going to maybe talk about directing a little bit. You had mentioned maybe an interest to talk about that. I'd love to talk about directing as well.
Well, then I will throw one direct question at you right now before we go.
Yeah.
About kind of what I was talking about finding your point of view on a piece as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same for you in directing? Or do you try to come in with a clearer vision of what you want the piece to be about?
I think it's more about finding the through line as a director. It's about finding the logic of the piece. Because if you get too hung up on this and like individual bubbles, you lose track, especially with classical text, you lose track of the through line. So I think
by individual bubbles, what do you mean?
Like, let's say we're talking about Hamlet. Like, okay, Hamlet and Gertrude, that's really cool. Let's explore what this scene looks like to make it the best that it can be. And Hamlet and Claudius, that can be really cool. Let's figure out what that can be. Like, I had a directing teacher once say, like, let's boil it down as simply as it can be, and let's stick to that. I think the job of the director is to develop the rules of the world and then be a stickler and keep to those rules of the world, unless there is a big reason to change it. And so, like, we're talking about Hamlet, we're talking about revenge, or we're talking about, like, or it doesn't have to be revenge. It can be whatever your point of view is. Like, I directed The Tempest at one point. But
that's what I'm saying, though. Exactly that is like that idea of like, hey, we're doing this. It's gonna be about this.
You have to, yes. It's not as much because it's not the art is not experiential in the same way that it is as an actor. You're not trying to get in the moment. You're trying to be the arbiter of what this experience. You are curating this, and it is more intellectual just in what it is. And you have to be an authentic and truthful sounding board for what is happening on stage. And I think you're the rock against the ocean a little bit, where people need to know that there's a rock there so that they're not going to drown. And a part of that is having an idea of what it is, having an arrow that you can point to and be like, this is the direction we're going in, people. Okay.
Yeah. This is so interesting to me because this is how I think of my acting process.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can talk about that later.
To be continued.
To be continued. I'll do my plug, or did you have another question? I don't want to, because I know you were probably over.
Oh, I mean, listen, it's all bullshit. It's all fucking.
Okay.
I don't have a boss. I am the producer. I'm the editor.
Okay.
But
I'll do whatever you want me to do.
But I do try to keep it to an hour. So,
okay.
There we talked a little bit about directing.
Yeah, a little bit.
But the reason that I asked that is because it seemed to me like. I had an inkling based on this conversation and kind of on our prior conversations is that there seemed to me like this contradiction here of like the need to have the vision versus the need to discover. And I think because we've been talking a lot about Shakespeare and where Shakespeare thrives is in contradiction, I was like, maybe we can dig into that a little bit. So
yeah,
we did. And we'll do that more. Joanna, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? Where can people see you working?
Yeah. People can find me at Joanna_Tsuhlares on Instagram. Tsuhlares, Joanna, 1N. Tsuhlares, Tsuhlares. I also have a website, joannatsuhlares.com. And yeah, if you just follow that, you'll see what I'm up to. I have some assisting things I just closed out. I'm kind of figuring out what my fall will be. So I don't know if I have anything in particular at the moment to plug, but hopefully there'll be some things in the works here in the fall that I'm going to try to get. We have a production of As You Like It that I'm hoping, we just had to delay it. I'm hoping will be coming in the next few months that I'll be directing. Is
this with the group of people that you did?
Yes.
Ariadne? And...
I have, this is another thing. I have a small production company. This is actually not with Ariadne. This is a different thing. I'm developing a play called Ariadne with a friend, which is what Carl's referring to. But I have a small production company called Rue 151 Productions that I made with my friend Richard. And that's the production company that's working on Hamlet, but also that's the production company that's going to be doing As You Like It. Yeah. And that's, you can find that if you just Google Rue, RUE 151 numbers productions, there's a website. You can figure it out.
Rock and roll. Mm-hmm. Well, I enjoyed our conversation very much.
Me too.
Thank you for being our first guest back after my little travel-induced hiatus. And you, dear listener, thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you again for tuning in. That was Joana Tsuhlares. I have been Carl Bindman, and this has been Artworkers, the Independent Artists Forum. If you have any questions or comments, you can find me on my website, carlbindman.com, or I haven't quite figured out the podcast hosting service, but there might actually be a way to do it through that. Thank you for bearing with the little pause in recording. I was away, and now I am back. As always, thank you to Louie Zong for the use of our theme song, Fragments. It's a great song, great artist, great animator.